Hey guys, it's Rosemary from The Hint of Rosemary, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make my version of ciabatta bread. We are going to start by making the sponge. For the sponge, we'll need 1 cup of all-purpose flour. Make sure you use unbleached, 1/8 teaspoon of active yeast, and 1/2 cup of room temperature water. There's no need to warm this up. And then mix it really well. I mix mine right in the bowl of my standing mixer. It is attached to my standing mixer already. So tomorrow I will add all the other ingredients to this. And I mean, for me, it's just so that I don't have to have another dirty bowl, but you can totally make your sponge or if you want to call it a pre-ferment in a separate bowl and then add it to your standing mixer tomorrow. All right, so we're gonna let this rest for 12 to 24 hours. So right now I'm making it at noon. I'm gonna let mine go 24 hours so I get a really nice flavor from the fermentation. But what you wanna look for tomorrow or when it's done is you will see this double in size and there'll be little bubbles all over the top. If you want to speed things up a little bit, you can put this in the warmer in your oven, like set it on proof, and it should be done like 8 to 12 hours, but I would just suggest letting it sit at room temperature for longer for that amazing ciabatta bread flavor. So cover it with a towel and we'll be back in about a day. All right, day number 2, and as you can see, the pre-ferment or sponge for the ciabatta bread doubled in size and has a ton of really nice bubbles, so there was some really good fermentation there. If you mix this in another bowl, you can add it right to your standing mixer, or if you did it like I did and mix it in your standing mixer, you can add all your ingredients right into here on top of it. So first I have 2 cups of bread flour. Bread flour is really good in ciabatta bread because it has higher protein than all-purpose flour does. So you're gonna get that amazing chewy ciabatta bread texture. Next we have 1.5 teaspoons of pink sea salt. We're gonna sprinkle it across the top. Next is 1/2 teaspoon of instant yeast, 3/4 cup of room temperature water, and 1/4 cup of plain yogurt. Today I'm actually using Lebna because I ran out of plain yogurt. So we'll see how this one turns out. Sometimes I like to experiment with my recipes and see if different ingredients give the same results, but Lebna is really similar to yogurt anyway, so I think it'll be just about the same as the last ciabatta bread that I made. So at first we're gonna start with the paddle attachment. Start it on low speed. We're gonna let it run for about a minute and then scrape it down just to make sure that there's nothing stuck to the sides of the bowl. Alright, turn it off. I like to scrape down the sides. Most standing mixers have a good reach, but I like to be really careful and just get everything down. If you are doing this by hand, it can be done. It's just gonna take a really long time and you have to be careful with not adding too much extra flour because ciabatta bread dough is really sticky, and if you're doing it by hand, you might be tempted to add more flour. to make it not stick to your hands, but you do not want to add too much flour. Ciabatta bread is a very, very wet dough. Okay, so now we're gonna turn up the speed to medium. I'm doing it on about a 4, and we're gonna let it run for about 4 to 6 minutes, just until it starts coming together a little bit more. All right, now that it's coming together a bit, we are going to change to a hook attachment and keep kneading it more. You can see that it is already developing some strength. That is a really good sign. Oh, there goes my timer. I was trying to knead it for about 6 minutes just to give you guys the exact amount of time that I do things. Let me just turn it off. All right. And you see the ciabatta dough is really, really sticky. So keep this in mind if you are trying to do this by hand. Attachment, I'm locking it in place, and I'm gonna do mine on about a 2. If you're using a different brand of standing mixer, it's about a medium-low. We're gonna let this run for just about 10 minutes. You will know it's done when it has formed a ball, and it actually is gonna start to look shiny, so that's when you know it's done. Let's check it. So you see how really shiny it is? It's okay if it looks like really, really sticky. You want your ciabatta bread dough to be sticky. So just gently kind of get it off the hook. See how shiny that is? We are going to rise this for about an hour. I like to put it in my oven warmer on proof. It helps it keep warm. Warmth is really important for dough to rise properly. And I'm just doing that today because it is freezing cold here in New York. If you live in a warmer climate, there's really no need to put it in your oven proofer. But if you live in a cold climate like me, I would definitely put this in your oven proof, or at least just inside your oven wrapped in a towel, just to keep it really warm so that it can rise properly. In my original recipe, I had transferred this to a different bowl. I'm not a big fan of dishes, so the last couple times I made it, I rose it right in this bowl and then did my starch and folds right in this bowl. It came out perfect. So if you're not a fan of dishes like me, there's really no need to transfer this to a different bowl. Okay, so cover it up with a towel, and I'm gonna stick this in my oven. I'm gonna put it on proof for a couple minutes and turn the proof off. My oven runs a little bit hot, so I don't wanna get it too hot. Or you can literally just put this right in your oven, wrap in another towel. There's no need to turn your oven on at all. It just keeps it a little warmer if you have a drafty house or a cold house. If you live in a warm area, just leave it out at room temperature. Okay, so an hour later, we're gonna take our dough out. In my original post, I drizzled this with olive oil, and that's really just to help it prevent sticking from your hand. But I've done it by just wetting my hand, and that works just as well. So that is the method I'm going to use today. So let me just go wet my hand. I'm using warm water on my hand. All right, so with my wet hand, we are taking from the side of the bowl, pulling up until you feel tension, and folding in towards the center. Work your way around, and if you start getting dough stuck to your fingers, just re-wet your hand. Stretching and folding helps redistribute the gluten and the yeast, which helps get you that really nice ciabatta texture and a really good flavor. So this is really important for making ciabatta bread. And I am doing it about 8 times. Once it starts getting a little bit stronger, I can actually pick it up and flip it so it's seam side down, but it's still pretty sticky. So just do your stretch and fold. Cover it up again, and we're gonna place it back in the oven or a warm spot in your house. Rise it for 30 more minutes and do another stretch and fold. All right, this is my second stretch and fold. The dough has a bit more tension and it's coming together a lot better. So let me wet my hand. I'm gonna do 6 to 8 stretch and folds right around the outside. And you can see it has so much more strength and it's coming together nicely in a ball. So I'm gonna pick it up, kind of fold it over and put it seam side down right in the bowl. And I'm going to rise it in the oven just one more time for 30 minutes. Your bowl from the oven. We're going to heat it up to 450 degrees, and I'm putting my Dutch ovens inside the oven so they get nice and hot and we can create that nice steam to get that crispy ciabatta bread shell. So I'm going to let those heat up in the oven for about 45 minutes to an hour. That gives a great amount of time to shape our loaves and let them rise one last time. So now that the ciabatta bread is done a second stretch and fold, you want to be really, really gentle with this, and you do not want to kind of like yank it out and throw it on the counter. You want to very, very gently ease it out of the bowl. Be careful not to pop any of the bubbles. This is one of the most important steps in ciabatta bread, because if you just kind of pull it out of the bowl, let it flop on the countertop, you're gonna really ruin all the work you did with the stretch and folds and developing those nice air pockets. And before I forget, we're gonna lightly flour the countertop. This is literally only about 1/8 of a cup of flour. I do not like to work with too much flour on my counter because I've noticed when I add too much flour, it kind of gets stuck inside the bread layers, and that's really not very good to bite into. Okay, so very gently, we are slowly getting our dough out. Okay, all right, grab a little bit of flour, gently pat it on the top, and you can feel that it has some nice bubbles in there. I'm gonna pick mine up once and kind of turn it, just because I feel it sticking to the countertop over here. But I don't like to move mine around too much, so don't be tempted to really move it around, just because moving it, picking it up, stretching it, you really risk popping those amazing air pockets. So get your knife or your pastry cutter flour just a teeny bit, just so it doesn't stick, and we are cutting it in half. I've seen different bakers do this differently. Some people literally stretch this entire thing out into a bigger portion, fold it over, then cut it in two. What I'm doing today is I am getting 2 separate pieces, and I am going to be shaping each one separately. I just find it a lot easier to transfer them into the Dutch oven. Okay, so use this to move one piece over very gently. The other one we can kind of leave in place, get a little more flour in there. So we're going to be shaping it into what I like to call kind of a letter size, like a piece of paper. So when you're picking it up from the sides very, very gently, be really, really careful not to pop any of those bubbles that you see. I go back and forth between the two because I stretch it a little bit, let it kind of get in shape, and rest for a second while I go move to the other one. I find that helps a lot with not trying to force it and stretch it too hard. Okay, so I'm gonna bring the camera over here just to give you guys a closer shot of what exactly I'm doing, because next I'm gonna fold each of these once they're all stretched out into what I call a letter, and then do their final rise, and then we're gonna put them straight in the oven. So see these nice air pockets? You do not want to pop those, or at least be careful not to pop too many of them, because those are what makes that signature ciabatta sponge-like texture that we all love. Okay, so I'm stretching this one. I find it's best to kind of pull on the sides. That really helps. And if it starts getting a teeny bit too sticky, you can use some of this flour on top again. So this one is just about the size I want it. Think of a piece of paper. You're trying to get into that nice rectangle shape. This one needs a little more work on the sides. If you notice there's an area that's thicker, like this side is thin, this side is thick, I'm only pulling from this side to get more of an even shape here. Okay, so for this one, we are first gonna fold this one because it's had a little bit of time to rest, kind of have that natural shape. The other one still feels a little tense, which is why I'm gonna let it rest a little bit, kind of naturally fall into its place. So this one, pick up one side, fold it about 1/3 down, just like you would a letter. One of those old-fashioned letters we used to send. If it's sticking, just use your scraper and kind of help it up. Don't try pulling or forcing this. This is a very fragile dough, and this step is very crucial in getting those nice air pockets. So lift up and fold over. There's really no need to, like, you know, in cinnamon buns, how you kind of seal the edge. With ciabatta bread, you don't really have to, but you can very lightly kind of put it in place. I'm gonna go grab my coarse corn flour because we are gonna let it rise on some corn flour that just gives that nice crusty bottom. So what I'm using is medium grind cornmeal. You can use whatever brand that you have. Just make sure it's like a medium or a coarse grind, just so you get that nice ciabatta crust. And I sprinkling it about the shape of my ciabatta loaf here. Now we're gonna get it up off the counter and flip it upside down because we want it to rise seam side down. We don't want this seam expanding in the oven and kind of giving you an irregular top. I have accidentally made my ciabatta bread seam side up in the oven before, and it came out pretty much the same, but just for aesthetics, make sure to rise it seam side down. So very, very gently flip it upside down. Now, some people cut the ends off to get a perfectly rectangular square loaf. I don't like messing with mine too much, so I leave it as it is, kind of very gently get it into shape, and I think it looks perfect, so we're gonna leave it the way it is. All right, over here, let's sprinkle some more of that corn flour. And I'm gonna do this side first. Let's get our scraper again. brush off extra flour. If you have too much on there, that's gonna bake inside of your loaf, and that is not a nice thing to bite into. If you want them to be like a teeny bit longer, a teeny bit bigger, you can absolutely pick it up and kind of very gently stretch. Or another amazing way to kind of gently stretch your ciabatta without bursting any of those bubbles is to just pick it up by the end that you want stretched, very gently, hold it for a second, and then lay it down to finish rising. But ciabatta loaves are not typically huge like an artisan bread or like a French or an Italian loaf. So it's totally fine that they're this small. If you want a huge ciabatta bread, I haven't tried it, but maybe not even cutting these two in half. You can shape this entire thing into one big rectangle and fold it over. If you do try it that way, please let me know how it turns out. I'm actually kind of curious. But the classic traditional ciabatta bread is made into two smaller loaves. So we are gonna let these rise for just about half hour while our Dutch ovens are heating up and getting nice and hot, and we'll be back in a half hour. So now we're going to very carefully transfer our final risen ciabatta loaves into our hot Dutch ovens. Be super careful because these are really hot. You do not want any part of your body touching that. So I lift my ciabatta by the bigger side first, kind of stretch it out a little bit, then I get my hand under the other side, or I use my bench scraper, pick it up, and then just plop it in there. Okay, let's do the other one real quick. Pick it up, plop it in there. I get a little scared of touching them. So that side is actually touching the side of the pan. You usually want to avoid that, but I'm always freaked out about getting burned. So it's okay. And the other one's in the center. Add our lids. We are baking these at 450 degrees for 15 minutes, removing the lids, and then the next 10 minutes, 450 degrees, uncovered. They are perfect. Look at that beautiful golden brown shell.